You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 94. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how to stop over drinking in 90 days without missing out on life. If you're not an alcoholic, but fed up with saying yes to a drink when you mean to say no, you're in the right place. Hi all, and welcome back to the podcast. All right, now before we get started, I wanted to give you a little preview of what's coming up. So next month it's October, and I will be marking Sober October with a mini program throughout the month where I'll be posting tips and advice and so on, very practical, pragmatic advice. On my socials, I will also be hosting a workshop at some point in the month, complete with a workbook as well for you all to follow along with. And I'll be doing some posts. I'll be answering questions that come in and all the rest of it. It's good stuff. So if you want to sign up so that you get notified when the workshop is and so on, you can go to 90dayslater.co/Sober October. And that's Sober October, all one word. And let me have your email there, and you'll all be signed up so that you know what's going on and won't miss out on anything. Okay, so that's that out of the way. Today, I'm going to talk about and share a powerful technique that you can use to define who you want to be around alcohol. It's really simple, and it also works. This is the cool thing. It also works when you're in the moment, right? When you're in the moment, feeling the desire. It's 7 o'clock on a Friday evening and you're faced with the wine, right? Because a lot of things that we think about, obviously can feel easier to deal with on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Gets to the evening, not so much. But this technique I'm going to talk about today works at all times. And like with all things I share, it's pragmatic. It's really something you can put into action straight away. In fact, you could use it tonight. Yes, right away. Now, I was thinking about this topic when I wrote my latest email to my email list. So listen, if you're not on that list, you should get on it, because I really want everyone who subscribes to have tools and questions and little tips and tricks that you can use to start learning how to manage your mind and change your relationship with alcohol. To get it, just head on over to 90dayslater.co/kickstart. It's all one word, kickstart. And in doing this, you'll also get a free Kickstart guide, right, where I walk you through 4 steps to get started on changing your drinking. But sign up here and you'll also be subscribed to receive my regular emails. Okay, so let's get back to today's episode. I'm sharing a simple but powerful technique that will not only help you take action, but it's going to give you a new perspective in the moment. So today I'm talking about your future you, and about what you want to achieve in the future. We're going to talk specifically about changing your drinking, but this, of course, is a much broader topic than just alcohol. But one thing I learned when I changed my relationship with white wine was just how much time I gained every day, right? Time I was able to put towards becoming a new version of myself. I tell you, I hadn't realized just quite how much time was tied up with alcohol, and how much of an excuse that had become as to what I was capable of achieving in my life. Maybe that resonates already. Well, you're for sure not alone. So let's get started. So I want you to start simply by looking ahead, to think really seriously about what you want to create in your future, right? To simply think about a future where you are more of who you want to be. This one thing will change your life. When you start thinking about the you who drinks less and who's thinking about your future that much more than your past, you're going to feel differently. Just that one thing. And not only will you feel differently, you're also going to start taking action in a way that leads towards that future. Now, here's the really fun thing about looking ahead. Nobody at all can tell you what to think about your future. No one. Even that person you know who always knows best, right? No one can tell you. You can decide right now that you'll be whatever you'll be, that you'll be a best-selling author, that you're really talented, that you're a brilliant singer. You can just decide all this stuff. You don't have to tell anyone. Now, I'm not saying necessarily, right, that all these things will come true. You can't just say it and then voila, it happens. But if you start to look ahead to the future in this way, if you start to ask, what do I want my life to look like? And you start moving towards creating that, well, that's when you start to feel a different emotion. And that different emotion is going to lead you to taking different action. It's going to lead you to creating different results. And it's not only that. This really affects how you show up, right? If you show up thinking how you want your future to be, and then that creates those feelings where you're creating something rather than, oh, here we go again, all right, nothing ever changes. The whole thing, the whole experience, the process as I call it, how you live your life will be that much more pleasant. Now, hear this. Your brain won't want to do this thinking ahead thing. Your brain is on a loop. It's thinking about what you're doing now and what you've done in the recent past. So when you think about the future, it's going to be challenging. The thing you may come up with, the answer you may come up with is, I don't know. I don't know how to drink less. I don't know how to build my business. I don't know how to make more friends. I don't know what I'll do with myself in the evenings if I'm not drinking. All right, when my brain did this, I answered it in a way that is not going to cause a blockage or a hold-up. I would say something like, right you are, I hear what you're saying. That's code for, you can say what you like, I'm going to do what I want. Right, and then I moved on. I didn't dwell on it. I switched my thoughts to my future, and then I used my brain for something productive, not something that was constantly driving my brain to the whine and to the negative spin cycle that makes you feel like your best years are behind you and yet you screwed something up and that you'll never learn, right? All that stuff. Because much as we think this kind of stuff again and again, none of those thoughts are true. And even if they were true, just stop thinking them because they feel terrible. Because what will happen if you do carry on thinking these same thoughts, right? If you don't ever think about how you want your future to look, your future, my friend, is going to look just like your past because it'll repeat and your brain won't know what to do other than just be efficient. And this works in all areas of your life, in your job, your family, your home, your pastimes, your drinking. Our brains will just merrily run the process on repeat. Now, while we're on the topic of the future, you might hear people talk about, play it forward, right? And this is to stop you doing something in the moment, to think about the clear head you're going to have in the early morning, right? All the positive vibes if you just manage to say no right now. Now, yes, that can work. But I tend to think it's only part of the solution. Because if you're just looking at tomorrow, you're kind of powering through today. And that's when we get into avoiding temptation and staying clear of the urges and all the rest of it. The techniques that will not make this a sustainable approach. You also need to ask, what are you searching for in the moment when you have the desire? Right? There's desire there to feel good. How can you get that for yourself without alcohol? That's another important part of it. But you can know that so much more easily if you spend time doing this longer term work looking at future you. Now, what I found when I started to do this work was that it was so worth it, right? I found I identified with my future self and I really, really knew I didn't want this struggle with drinking for the rest of my life. I realized in that moment, and this was fairly profound, very profound, I realized in that moment I was willing to do what it took, right? Whatever it takes, that's me. And that is an important ingredient here. You don't need more willpower. You don't need to be hard on yourself, but you do need to be willing to do what it takes. And that is not always easy, right? It involves feeling the restlessness and the stress and not solving it with alcohol anymore. But I found always that by going into my future, that helped tremendously. I could look ahead and ask, what did I want the reason to have been, right? The reason why I cut back. And that made everything else so much easier. Because you're tapping into your future identity. Now, this seems ridiculous to many people, right? I can ask people to do things like visualize going to a dinner. And they might say, oh, it'll be fine. I'm not going to overeat. I'm not going to overdrink. Okay, but I want you to visualize and actually practice the dinner anyway. Just practice the event coming up, because there's no downside to doing this, right? It's the ultimate in self-care. It's like you calling your future self, right? I'm going to ring my future self and I'm going to check, am I all right? All right, so you're prepared when you go into the event, you already know what to expect. It's kind of like you've sent the Secret Service ahead of time, right, to check for all the dangers. Even though this may seem as though it's overdoing things, right, is this visualization stuff really necessary? It can be so easy to justify a drink in the moment when you haven't planned for that, right? And also when you haven't planned for the objections, especially when it's a holiday period. So here's what I want you to do, right? And this is the exercise piece, this practical piece of the podcast. I want you to go forward in time, pick whichever time scale you want, 1, 3, 10, 30 years. Decide how old you are, how much money are you making, what do you weigh, what's your job, where are you living, how do you think about yourself. Decide what's your relationship with alcohol, right? I want you to think ahead to that person, to the person you want to be around alcohol. Where it doesn't matter if you're at a party or restaurant because you've changed your relationship with it and that doesn't change, right? I want you to let yourself and let your brain go to that place. How will you feel towards yourself? What will have changed? What will you have been able to do because you honoured your commitment to yourself? I want you to think and ask yourself, what does that version of you who's achieved her goals or his goals, what do they do? What is the one thing they're doing? Because you're probably avoiding doing that thing if you haven't achieved your goals yet. For instance, how would the future version of you think, feel and act about commitment? And what could be true about that for you today? I do this all the time for other things in my life now that alcohol is no longer a challenge. Where I've looked ahead and I can see my future me there. And then I think about where I am now and where I want to be. And I ask, what am I willing to sacrifice now for later? What emotion I'm going to need to maintain or to conquer, right, to get to that point. Then I can start feeling that way now. This is making decisions from your future, right? What would you do if you made a decision from your future self today? Would your future self negotiate with herself over an extra glass of wine this evening? Whatever the external pressures. And then how could that be true for you today? How could you think that perhaps I'm just going to be proud of who I'm being, no matter what? How can I generate some of that feeling I want right now in the moment today? How could what you do now be a gift or a decision from your past self to take care of your future self? Remember who you're becoming. Do you believe in you? You need to believe in you. It's your job, it's your responsibility. Start small if you need to, right, in this self-belief area. But please always believe in yourself. And spend more time thinking forward than back. And if you know how you want your future to look, but you don't know how to get there, I can help. That's what we'll explore in our free call together. Then I'll build the exact plan to get you there. If you feel you spend more time looking back, then book that call with me and I'll keep your eyes pointed forwards. You can do that at 90dayslater.co and click on the book a call box. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget, opt in for that Sober October mini program I'm running. So it's 90dayslater.co/Sober October. And I will see you next week. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around and they don't miss out on life. And we do it in 90 days. The effect is permanent. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.